All right. Well, the Buckeyes seem to be saying goodbye to the competition in the Big Ten. They also say hello to a bye week following a fine effort at home against Sparty. This is Ohio State Buckeyes live. We come your way each and every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern Time with the best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the nation. That includes, of course, Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone and Mr. Steve Hellwagon from 247 Sports Bucknuts. Guys, how you doing tonight?
Doing very well.
Great to be here.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Steve. Not you, Tony, of course, but
no,
we've missed you, Steve, in recent weeks. You've missed a couple
last
shows.
Week I was in Chicago, I think last week for Big Ten basketball. So yeah, it was. It's been it's been a while since I've been on the show.
They play basketball at Ohio State as well, I understand.
Yeah, they're going to be a top 20 team probably this year going into the season, and depending on how it all comes together, maybe better than that. So should be a fun year to follow the Buckeyes on the hardwood.
Their first team might be a little bit better than that.
Their first exhibition is 3 weeks from tonight, so we may have to make an adjustment that week.
Okay. Well, this football team might be a little bit better than top 20.
That's what it seems like.
There was a Cincinnati test. There was the Cincinnati level test. We know what that turned out to be. Then there was Nebraska. That was the game that was circled on the calendar. That was the Iowa-Purdue 2019 version. We know what happened there. 31-0 at half? So who knows what the score
38 to get it right, Mark.
38 to nothing at the half. Which always, to me, begs the question. I would love to know if these kids had the incentive in a game like that to not let off the throttle. Like if it were legal and ethical to go out there and say to all the key Ohio State players, we'll give you $100 for every point you score or point differential. How bad could it have been? They beat Nebraska that bad. And now Michigan State, maybe the best defense in the country, certainly the best rushing defense in the country for the past year and a half. Sparty always, the recent series has been that they give the Buckeyes just fits. Steve, how good is this team?
Well, the teams that they've been put in front of them, they've taken care of business. And they are the only team in the country that's top 10 in total offense, scoring defense, and total defense, yards and points. They're the only team in the country that's top 10 in both categories. So they have done an outstanding job against the schedule that's been put in front of them. And the other thing you think about is I know some of the various strength of schedule rankings have Ohio State at or near the top of the undefeated teams. The records of the teams that they have played, deducting out the 6 losses to Ohio State, they are combined 20-6. So the teams that they have played have won games otherwise, which includes 3 Big Ten teams and then 3 Group of 5 teams. And so one of the better Group of 5 teams, as it's turning out, Cincinnati, now 4-1. So I don't know. It looks good, but there are tougher challenges coming for Ohio State. They play on paper as of today 3 more ranked teams, which would be Wisconsin, Penn State, and Michigan. And then another one, which would be in the Big Ten championship game if they qualify for that. So there's plenty of challenges left out there for this team to try and prove that they deserve to be in the playoff.
Steve, if they qualify for that, I know Buckeyes fans are listening to us right now thinking, this is one of the greatest teams of all time.
Oh, I know.
Through people's minds already.
I know. But, I lived through 1995 where they had a pat hand with Eddie George, Bobby Hoying, Terry Glenn, Ricky Dudley, Orlando Pace, Mike Vrabel, Sean Springs. I mean, it was a pat hand. There was no question they were going to the Rose Bowl, and then they lost, at Michigan, of all places, 31-23. And Charles Woodson, a star, was born that day. I think he had a couple of interceptions in that game. So, yeah, I don't know. Again, something extraordinary probably has to happen for this team to lose a game because they seem to be on top of things. But I want to see how it goes from here.
I was thinking of the other star that emerged on that day with the long last name, Biaka Batuka.
Yeah.
All right, Tony, your thoughts about this team?
Well, one of the things you mentioned the test. There's a Cincinnati, then there's Indiana, and then there was Nebraska, then there was Michigan State, and then it's always about what is the next test. And my thing is maybe Ohio State just is this good, and all of the teams they're beating are pretty good as well, as Cincinnati is showing. We'll see what happens with Nebraska and Michigan State even this weekend. But they are doing everything that they should be doing. If they're a top 4, top 3, top 5 team, these are the scores that they should be putting up on these kind of teams. And the biggest thing for me is the defense from where it is this year right now to where it was last year. I did some research today, and they gave up so many big plays last year. And in the first 6 games last year, they gave up 20 plays of 30 yards or more. This year, they've only given up 4. And in the first 6 games last year, they gave up 20 plays of 30 yards or more. This year, they've only given up 4 of those plays. Only two of those plays came while the starters were still in the game. And even those 2 plays came when Buckeyes were up by 3 touchdowns or more. So it's amazing how locked in this defense is, and they only give up big plays when there would be an excuse for you to not be locked in, when they're up by 3 touchdowns and things are already pretty much over. And just the way this defense is, it hasn't even been healthy yet all year. And they're able to rotate guys in and still get production. They're getting young guys in, and they're proving that they belong. Like Zach Harrison last week was in for maybe 14 plays, but was in the backfield maybe 4 or 5 times. And they're just getting a lot of production out of everybody, but nobody is really standing out. Like leading tackler might be Malik Harrison or Jordan Fuller with maybe 20, 25 tackles in like 6 games. And nobody's going to put up huge stats other than Chase Young with his sacks. But that's because they are a complete defense, and you don't have one guy, one linebacker that is needed to make 160 tackles because they're not on the field that much either. You don't build up a bunch of tackles when you're going 3 and out. So, yeah, I mean, if they're not legit, nobody is legit this year, and the entire team. Like if the Buckeyes aren't legit, then I don't know how you would say anybody else is either, because, I mean, the 6 games we've seen have been pretty good, and everybody else has played 5 or 6 games. So the proof, they've put as much on the table as anybody else, I guess I'd say.
What else was legit was running the football,
Man,
like that against that front 7. They don't give up anything to anyone.
And this is the second time in 3 years they've run for over 300 yards on Michigan State. I think those are maybe the only 2 against Mark D'Antonio. And that was the most impressive thing, obviously, in that game, because you should hold Michigan State to around 10 points or so. But I still think they could throw the ball around if they wanted to. They just don't need to. And so they're not going to really take many risks. They're just going to do what's easy, win the surest way. And when you've got Justin Fields and J.K. Dobbins is playing like an All-American right now, and then you throw in Master Teague, he's kind of a closer. He'll close the 4th quarter out, and you almost feel bad for Michigan State because they should be able to not stop them, but they held up very well in the 1st quarter. So you're thinking, all right, this is going to be real. This is going to be a fun one to watch. And then all hell breaks loose in the 2nd quarter.
They're the best 2nd quarter team in the history of college football. I mean, they
football.
were 110-10 in the 5 previous games, and then were 24-10 in points this past week. So now they're 134 scored and 20 allowed in the 2nd quarter. And it may take them a quarter to figure some things out. They had a good 1st quarter. The first game, they were up 28-0 on Florida Atlantic in the first 9 minutes or so. But after that, it's taken them a few possession or 2 to kind of get with the program. It was a little bit shaky in the 1st quarter this past week, just 16 yards on 16 plays for Ohio State in the 1st quarter offensively. But then they rained down all kinds of heck in that 2nd quarter, 296 yards total offense, and 24 points. Running the football, I think they just wore Michigan State out, was kind of the theory of it, and hit the big one, the 67-yarder out to J.K. Dobbins. That made it 24-10. They got a quick 3 and out, got the ball back on a punt, and were able to go down and kick a field goal with 5 seconds left to go up 27-10 at the half, and it was pretty much all over at that point. So Ohio State very impressive, at least in that 15-minute period. Won that one pretty handily, and pretty much decided the game before halftime once again.
Buckeye fan Cheryl, we appreciate you encouraging everyone to hit the like button. Tony, we talk about this as this steamroller has started in week 1 and then got rolling and keep going. We have pegged specific units as, okay, this is another great Ohio State unit, or this is much improved from last year. Are there any specific players that you can point to say, this kid's been in the program for 2 or 3 years, but man, he's just a different guy this year?
There's actually a few. Just 2 in the cornerback room alone, with Damon Arnett, who's now in his 3rd year as a starter, but is finally playing like a first-round talent or All-American status. Jeff Okudah gets all of the attention. I think Damon Arnett has played the best of any of those corners. But then you also have Shaun Wade, who is a redshirt sophomore, who was the number 2 corner in the 2017 class behind Jeff Okudah, and is now the 3rd corner starting for the Buckeyes. I think he maybe played more than anybody else in Saturday's game as that slot corner. And I asked both Ryan Day and Greg Madison about his importance this week, because he plays that slot, and Ryan Day said that offenses like to throw to that slot guy because it's an easier throw than the throws outside. So you need somebody that can defend those quick slot guys. And you've got Shaun Wade at like 6'2", 195 pounds doing it. But then you also saw Shaun Wade in that game blowing up 2 different screen passes. One way out wide while he was getting blocked by an offensive lineman who was split out wide specifically to keep Shaun Wade from making that play. And then another one he blew up later in the game and held up the play long enough for his teammates to get there and tackle everybody. And he's really, really solid. And he's a guy who has maybe 2 or 3 starts, before this season. And now they're talking, you got people wondering if he's going to turn pro after this year as a redshirt sophomore. And now you're talking about losing all 3 of your cornerbacks in 1 year. And he's a unique guy because he allows them to play a unique defense. I mean, how many defenses do you see out there with 1 starting safety and 3 starting cornerbacks?
Steve, we've got a comment that I specifically need you to respond to from some Hellwagen guy. Let's get it started in here.
Yeah,
my apologies. My producer was just out to lunch and got us revved up here a couple minutes late.
There you go.
So
get
everybody,
it fired. Get it all fired up here tonight.
Let's get it fired up on a bye week. And this was again supposed to be one of these trap games, as we call them. But Northwestern just, I don't know. We'll have more to say about the Wildcats next week. But they are limited, to be kind, on offense.
I'll pick up the theme that Tony had. Baron Browning is a guy that kind of came out of nowhere, that had been in the shadows the last couple of years, injured and everything. And now that he's healthy, he's playing great football. Beyond that, if I think about, he mentioned Wade, which was a good one. Defensive line, that's gone about pretty much how you'd think it might. Tommy Togiai and Haskell Garrett are getting a few more reps at defensive tackle probably than you would have thought. Josh Myers is a guy at center who's done just a bang-up job, who didn't play much, redshirted and then didn't play much at all last year. So those are 3 or 4 guys right there that have kind of come out of nowhere. Of course, Teague redshirted last year, and now he's the redshirt freshman sensation right now. He's up over 400 yards, and I was asked I put a story up about the running game on bucknuts.com, and I was asked as a reply to that, can he get to 1,000 yards? Because Dobbins is almost there. He'll be there with one more of these 150-yard games. He's there. But Teague, mid-400s, and what would it be, 6, 7, 8? Well, anywhere from 7 to 9 games remaining, he's got a legitimate chance to get to 1,000 himself. So if they take it that far. And certainly they're going to have their share of blowouts. If you think about Maryland, Rutgers, and Northwestern, on paper, those games should be decided in the midway through the first half. And theoretically, Teague, they'll rest Dobbins and get him out of harm's way. Teague could get 15 or 20 carries in each of those games, go over 100 yards in maybe 2 of those 3 games. Maybe Maryland gives them a little better game, but Rutgers and Northwestern right now are scraping the bottom of the barrel in the Power 5 conferences. I mean, Northwestern, just to put that one to bed, they're in the bottom 5 nationally out of 130 teams. They are somewhere between 125 and 130 in scoring and total offense. That's how bad they've been. And they're not going to mount any kind of threat against Ohio State. And I told people before the season, I knew their schedule was so difficult in this stretch. I just wondered if they might be 2-3 or 2-4, whatever, when Ohio State came to town. Turns out they're going to be 1-4. And it's pretty ugly right now at Northwestern.
Yeah, we're seeing a Stanford team that's probably the worst that they've fielded in a decade. I watched them play Northwestern, and there was no thought of, they were only up 10-7 with like a minute left in the game, but there was no thought that Northwestern was any threat. They just couldn't block anyone. They have no explosive players. They just have nothing on offense. Saw them play Wisconsin a couple weeks ago, and they inexplicably, just out of Northwestern grit and guile and gamesmanship, made a 24-3 game, what should have been a 24-17 game. I don't know why Pat Fitzgerald was going for 2 and putting them in a hole that made it 24-15. They could have been within a touchdown, but they somehow just, again, out of Northwestern resourcefulness, got back into the game. But that was brutal to watch too. Yeah, they just have nothing on offense and can't. They have their typically just lack of explosiveness, but now they don't have an offensive line to give their quarterback any time to do anything. It's I don't know how they're going to gain any kind of yardage against this defense.
That's your head coach right there, Mark.
That is my head coach.
Making these crazy calls.
Well, he was making I can't defend that in any way. I don't know what he was thinking. And then he had defense for it. Just, we had a good play or whatever he said. But we rarely look at the offensive line unless they're getting beat, but they've been dominant. And David Green Shield mentions the interior of the line being an upgrade.
Definitely. And this was something that we had talked about on my podcast, that it was expected because of, if you talked to Greg Studrauer last year about Josh Myers, he raved about him and his toughness and how smart he was. So you expected this. And then you bring in Wyatt Davis, who played last year in the Rose Bowl in the Big Ten championship game. And you bring in Jonah Jackson. If you watch any of his highlights from last year, he's just a mean guy. He's a nasty guy on the field. You've seen that this year where he's had some holding calls from maybe blocking a little bit too long or, putting somebody in the ground too long. Those guys have the right makeup for what it takes to run in the Big Ten. And I'm not sure that really what they had last year with Michael Jordan and Demetrius Knox and Malcolm Pridgeon was really, I don't think they were mean enough, tough enough, nasty enough. I don't want to say they weren't tough enough. I just don't think they embraced it the way these guys do. And they aren't as emphatic in terms of running the ball. Because you look at Pridgeon was a tackle. You look at Michael Jordan, came to Ohio State as a tackle. These are big, tall guys, as opposed to the guys they've got in there now who have been guards all their lives. Josh Myers came to Ohio State as a tackle. He was a tackle for about 2 days. I think it was Nick Bosa who ran around him and proved to him that, you're going to have to play on the interior, and that's where he's been ever since. And they have the right makeup all along that offensive line to run the ball, and obviously you're seeing it. And I think, yes, it helps that they have a running quarterback, because I've been saying for a while that was one of the reasons they didn't run the ball very well last year, because there was no threat of the quarterback run. And J.K. Dobbins has improved his demeanor, but the offensive line is such a huge part to that as well. And I give them so much credit because they are some tough dudes, and they've gone back. They used to be called the Slobs, and that went away for a couple of years because they had that offensive line didn't like it, and now they've trying to start maybe readopting that. But they've got the right mentality and demeanor for what this offense likes to do.
All right, switching from the 2019 Buckeyes for a second here. Want to update everyone on the commit from Rancho Cucamonga, California, CJ Stroud, fourth-rated pro-style quarterback.
Yeah, well, he's just an offer at this point. They offered him.
Oh, they offered him. Okay.
Yeah, just they offered him because they are looking to take two quarterbacks. They already have Arizona quarterback Jack Miller committed, and there was some question about whether he would be okay with a second quarterback. You know how that goes when you've got one committed. It's rare to take a second because that guy, the committed guy, doesn't like it. So so far, it seems like he's okay with it. Although he did tweet out with an emoji, this weekend when CJ Stroud was on campus, which everybody knew. But so yeah, Stroud, who's the number 4 rated passer and pro style quarterback in the 24/7 composite, the top 100 guy in 24/7's own ranking. So he's a guy. He's a West Coast guy, but he doesn't have a lot of huge offers. He's got like Cal and like Colorado and stuff like that, and now Ohio State. So I guess he has one huge offer and some West Coast offers, and even a Yale. But right now, I think all the crystal balls are pointing at Ohio State. So it looks like they will have two quarterbacks in this class for as long as Jack Miller is part of it, basically.
We talk Ohio State football every Wednesday night. We got Tony Gerdeman on the line from theozone.net and also Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts, who does a fine job there and has been joining us, both of these guys, for a long, long time, talking Ohio State football. And Steve has done a very nice thing in posting these videos that we produce each and every week on Bucknuts. Gentlemen, real quick before we talk more football, just let people know what you guys are working on, where people can find you. Tony, you mentioned your podcast a few minutes ago.
Yeah, it's the Buckeye Weekly podcast. You can get it. Actually, right now during the season, we're about 3 times during a week, so we're messing up on the weekly part, but it is out there at all of your local podcast establishments, and yeah, it's an easy listen, I guess,
as opposed to this show.
Yeah.
Where we make it difficult. Steve, what have you been working on recently?
Well, enjoying this open week, trying to get caught up on life in general. Now we only have 2 weeks of games at Northwestern on Friday, and then back home with Wisconsin after that. And there'll be another open week, which will coincide with the start of the basketball season. So that works out pretty good the way that all comes together. But the overlap is coming, and for those of us who try and cover both sports, it's going to be real, and it's coming soon enough. But obviously most of what we do is football coverage and bucknuts.com, and we have a daily morning podcast there and all kinds of interactive stuff for everyone who follows the Buckeyes.
Folks in the live chat, we remind you that the Super Chat is on, so you can help us build the channel by contributing in the Super Chat, and simply like, comment, share the videos, and subscribe here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. My Week 7 predictions, my Week 6 predictions, back on a roll at 13-6 against the spread. So grab the link in the description section of any of the videos, and it says Voice of College Football Community. Grab that link, and you not only get the predictions, you get all sorts of extra content, exclusive live streams with you right there at Patreon. And you can also, Christmas is coming. It is coming. I'm not going to acknowledge it until like the 15th or 20th of December, but a lot of people, celebrate it. I used to work at Walmart way back, and yeah, the shipments come in September to start lining the warehouse back there. So you can shop at Amazon using our link in the description section below to help us build the channel. All right. What are the fans saying out there about this team? You guys hear more of it than anyone in regards to your Twitter feed, the direct messages, the message boards on your respective sites. Anything off the beaten path in regards to, we're the greatest team ever, but any general vibe out there?
I think Ohio State fans are bullish on this team. When you go to Nebraska and beat them 48-7, and then beat Michigan State, a nemesis in recent years, 34-10, and really don't give them much of an opening to do anything. And really a defense that came in giving up about 250 yards a game, 50 yards rushing a game, and you get over 300 yards rushing and over 500 yards total. That pretty much says it all. So I guess we'll see in the weeks to come. Michigan State's got some tough games coming up at Wisconsin. They got to play Michigan and Penn State down the stretch as well. So we'll see how good they turn out. They're 4-2 right now. I think 8-4 is looking at about the high water mark for them. Although Brian Lewerke seems to me to be a pretty good quarterback, they're going to have to beat one of those three teams I just mentioned to get to 8-4. So that's a mathematical certainty there. So I don't know if they're capable of doing that or not. At the same time, Ohio State, as we said earlier, they've got their bed made for them. I mean, it's Northwestern, figuratively a walkover coming up on the Friday night. Then Wisconsin and Columbus. Wisconsin has what I consider a no-name defense. I don't know if anybody knows who any of the starters are on the Wisconsin defense, but all they do is hold people to single digits week in and week out. I think Northwestern had 14 points against them, something like that, in that game out there. 23-14, something like that was the final score. They can run the football, certainly, with Jonathan Taylor. Can they throw it? That's the big question. And so, I guess get through those two, take another off week, play Maryland and Rutgers, and then you get down to the end of the year with Penn State and Michigan, the ones that are going to mean everything for this Ohio State team if they can get to that point undefeated. So it really shapes up in a big way for this team if they can get there to that point.
Mark, you asked how the fans are reacting. It was, I think, a week ago, somebody on our board mentioned how much everybody's getting along this year. And it's amazing how well the internet does when things are going well. And so, yes, it has been a noticeable, as Steve said, people are very bullish and almost friendly. So it's been nice.
Steve, you mentioned single-digit scoring. Speaking of which, the Michigan defensive line basically saved Jim Harbaugh in the season, at least for another week. I watched every play of that game against Iowa, and the Michigan offense continues to be a mess. It was supposed to be this explosive, dynamic offense, but every facet of the offense is just deplorable. But the defensive line just completely overwhelmed Iowa's offensive line. Nathan Stanley had no time. He was under siege from snap number one, and the Michigan defense survives 10-3. In regards to, I would love to get your take. We'll start there before we march through the schedule in the two big games this week. Your thoughts on the Wolverines?
Well, I watched the first half, and obviously Ohio State was playing at 7:30, and I wasn't planning to leave my house till closer to 4 or 4:30. And so I had gotten up early in the morning to take care of some other stuff, and I said, well, I got time here. I'll just take a nap. So I went in and laid down, and my wife came in with about a minute to go in the game and said, hey, there's a minute to go in the game, and I was driving. And should I turn it on? I'm like, yes, by all means. Let's see how this thing ends. And she turns it on. The score's still 10-3. And I was like, holy cow, what did I miss? Or thank God I missed that. And, one more lost possession for Iowa at the end, and that was that. I had that thing pegged in maybe the second quarter. They're down 10-0. They drove. They got a 1st and goal at maybe the 10-yard line. They got 2 yards on first down. It's 2nd and goal from the 8, and you're down 10-0. What did they do? They handed it off to the running back and got down to the 4-yard line. Now it's 3rd and goal from the 4. They tried to pass. It was incomplete. They kicked the field goal. I mean, you're down 10-0. It's 2nd and goal from the 8. I mean, if there's ever a time to throw the ball in the end zone, 2nd and goal from the 8. Instead, they ran it. Now it's 3rd and goal at the 4, which I guess you could run it or you could throw it from there if you wanted to go 4 down territory on it, I guess. I don't know. But that to me was just a microcosm of the whole mess. And Iowa's no good. I mean, they kept them in the top 25, but they're not going to beat a good team, I don't think. They're certainly going to beat Wisconsin. I can't see that. They may not beat Nebraska or Minnesota. I don't know. I guess we'll see about that. Michigan, I don't know. You're playing at home. Yeah, Iowa's got a decent enough defense, a pretty good defense, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the disconnect is. Injuries, no running back. I don't know. They just don't move the needle. And again, they're there kind of by osmosis still. If that team's name was Missouri or Oregon State or whoever else, they probably wouldn't be ranked quite as highly as they are. So, based on people having watched them play.
I don't think Michigan's defensive line is that good, and I was surprised at how well they did against Iowa, where they are supposed to have 2 NFL tackles. And I heard about Tristan Wirfs and Larry Jackson. Yeah, both being like possible first rounders before the season, and they didn't look anything like that. They were abused by Kwity Paye, who has done nothing until this week. I think the Michigan defensive line came into this game with maybe 1.5 sacks, and he had 2.5 by himself. And Aiden Hutchinson was in there as well. And it's just they're not a productive group, Michigan's defensive line. So when they do that against Iowa, it makes me think less of Iowa. And I was expecting more of Iowa this week. I actually picked Iowa to win by like 3 or 4.
I did too.
Because I thought they would be able to run it enough. And I didn't know Nate Stanley was that bad, frankly. He threw some terrible passes. He made Shea Patterson look like the better starting quarterback, which if you do that, man, you're not having a very good day. And Shea Patterson, I think it's just a matter of time before it's Dylan McCaffrey's job. But can McCaffrey ever get healthy? And then could he ever stay healthy? I don't know. I can't answer that one. And Joe Milton's not ready behind him. And as I said before, the longer a quarterback plays under Jim Harbaugh, the worse they get. So I don't know. Do you turn to your true freshman and then hope that he's at his peak right now as a true freshman because he's only going to get worse under Jim Harbaugh? I don't like that offense. I don't like the demeanor of Harbaugh or the reflection of it in his players. And it's a stagnant program right now that needs something that he can't provide.
Yeah, it's a bit surprising that that it has hit this point. They could have taken off. It's like they hit a fork in the road, and it appears as though they've leveled off, and this is what they're going to be under him.
And the thing is, they could win out and go to the playoffs. They still control their entire destiny. But what have they shown for you to think that that's actually realistic?
Not much of anything. Not much of anything. As we look at this week's slate of games, there's basically 2 that stand out to me. Although Nebraska, Minnesota, that's a big game in the Big Ten Western Division. Although Wisconsin has shown to be the class to date, and I would still say Iowa looks like the second best team in the division. But there are a lot of games to be played, and Minnesota's undefeated right now, having gotten a couple light touches in the Big Ten, and then obviously a week non-conference schedule. Although they went out to Fresno State and won close. I know at one point they had the lowest scoring disparity, plus or minus for an undefeated team through 4 or 5 weeks of the season in years going back. But it's Nebraska, Minnesota looking for survival in the Big Ten. Michigan State, Wisconsin. We're looking at the 2 best programs outside of Ohio State, the second and third best programs over the last decade in the Big Ten. But Michigan State, they look to be in a tough spot in regards to where their program's headed. Most of their best players this season, this is their final run. It's a very senior-laden team, and they don't look to be getting much better at Michigan State and probably regressing, and they've got to make a stand at Wisconsin, and we've got Penn State at Iowa as well as an interesting game. The last 2 times they've gotten together, the last 2 years, it's been a tremendous game. 2 years ago, Trace McSorley had to throw a touchdown in the last second of the game to Jawan Johnson in the back of the end zone to pull that one out. And they picked off your favorite quarterback, Nathan Stanley, in the final minute or so.
Who hasn't?
Happy Valley. to pick that one off. So, Steve, what stands out to you in regards to, and I know that there was a question earlier in the live chat regarding Wisconsin or Penn State, who's the biggest threat, and they both have big games this week.
Yeah, I like that question. I would say to me, Penn State may be the more complete team, although, as I outlined earlier, Wisconsin's defense seems like the real deal. I guess I need to watch some games this weekend and really get a feel for which team I think is the better team. Penn State has a tough assignment. I think they're on the road under James Franklin. They're something like 0-6 or 8, something like that, against ranked teams on the road under James Franklin. So this would be crossing a new threshold for him if they're able to go to Iowa and win a game against a ranked opponent like Iowa. Iowa at night can be a very difficult place to play, as Ohio State found out 2 years ago there. So, but Penn State, I mean, you look at their numbers. I mean, other than the 17-10 game against Pittsburgh, they've dominated their opponents similarly to what Ohio State's done. Now, granted, their opponents aren't a whole heck of a lot to write home about. I think FCS, Idaho was one of them. I'm drawing a blank.
Maryland.
They beat Pitt by a touchdown. That was their closest game by far.
Yeah, Maryland was very impressive. They went into Maryland and won, I think, 59-0 on that Friday night when we were in Nebraska. I want to see that SEC game. Certainly, that sounds very intriguing. Is Joe Burrow the real deal? Is Florida the real deal? I guess we'll know more after this week.
Tony and Steve, I'm going to have to cut into your time next week because we need to give time to Daniel Nieves Skidmore. Got to bring him on. I got to get the explanation on the Ohio State collapse to go to 6-6. What is he seeing that we're just completely missing?
Maybe
I don't know.
He's a Rutgers truther. Now, if Rutgers does win, they beat Ohio State. Do you keep that coach, right? You have to sign him to you have to sign Nunzio to a long-term deal if they beat Ohio State right there.
2 years ago, he's the head coach at Bergen Catholic, and now he's an interim head coach in the Big Ten. And certainly they didn't respond with the way Maryland whacked them pretty good last week. That's going to be par for the course for that team going the rest of the way. They got some tough ones out there still. So, yeah, it's unfortunate. They're going to go 1-11, it appears, 2 years in a row. And, they're Big Ten in name only. They got to start recruiting like a Big Ten team, keeping the best players from the metropolitan area at home to play at Rutgers. And right now it's easier said than done.
It can't be done, I don't think. Only with Urban Meyer.
It's tradition here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, to give the big welcome to first-timers here. I've never seen the handle Ken Haynes, and fortunately, and this is a compliment to everyone out there that has helped us build the channel, there have been too many of you that have been first-timers over the last couple months for me to possibly go through 40 and 50 people at a time. They used to come in like one at a time, so I'd be able to say, yeah, I've never seen you before. Hey, but it would look like something like this, Welcome to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Always love to know who you root for and how long you've been watching. But Ken, thank you so much for the contribution. We appreciate it. We welcome your comments and your questions as we will stay on here for another 10 or 15 minutes. James Warner, Mark has become great at posturing on the truth. Don't know what that refers to.
I don't even know what that means.
Penn State, they play some defense there too. That's the strength of the team. And the Sean Clifford looks like he's progressing rather well.
Yeah, I'm interested to watch this one. As we just talked about Iowa, I don't know what to think about them, but I have no faith in James Franklin when it comes to road games, even though he's come close at Ohio State. But I think Sean Clifford has been as good, as you could hope, and he's been able to run the ball. The problem is they don't have anybody else really to help him run. They're not getting that running game going, and he's had to do a lot. And you wonder how much more can you ask him to do? and what happens if he does get hurt or if they lose him for any period of time. But I'm haven't been able to watch much football this year, so I'm really looking forward to this weekend. And just I'll have 2 TVs on, I'll have 2 laptops going, 2 phones going, whatever I need, because we only get a couple of these weeks, so you don't only get 1 week of 1 week a year. Now we get 2 with 2 bye weeks this year. So this will be my first chance to watch Alabama, basically. So you got Alabama, Texas A&M. Can Texas A&M do anything? I'm with Steve. Maybe make it look better than it is. But I also think Alabama is going to start putting the hurt on people and trying to build up their. You got a lot of people talking about several different teams, and they're going to have to start getting into that conversation even more as Ohio State and LSU, Georgia continue to maybe horn in on some of their attention. They might try to grab it back. And I'm looking forward. I don't expect Florida to be able to keep up with LSU, but it will be fun to watch Joe Burrow play against a decent defense for a change. And it's amazing what happens when you bring a passing game to the SEC. You look what Alabama did and how much they're standing out. You look what LSU is doing and how much they're standing out. It's almost like they don't see modern offenses in the SEC as much as they like to think you do. And you just throw the ball around a little bit and you get all of this attention. And it's, Joe Tiller did it 20 years ago in the Big Ten. I'm just saying.
I'm sure there's a few people out there scratching their heads when they hear you comment, Tony, that you never get to see much football. And Steve made the same comment. I think we outlined this during the off season, just in regards to these 2 gentlemen and their profession, in regards to the focus that they have to have on Ohio State football and the preparation for game day, sometimes the travel. Yes, laser focus, Ohio State football. They're on the field for 3.5 hours. You got to get to the stadium early. You got to stay late. You go to the news conference after the game. You go to the locker room. You get all your quotes. You got to write your stories. You got to write sidebars. It's a full throttle day. And I got to admit, it was exciting going to the stadium, standing on the side. I do kind of like one half in the press box, one half on the sideline when I was back in my SEC days. But now, I do what you gentlemen are going to do this week. I get like 3 screens and I stay in my living room and I try to cover everyone at the same time. And it's an easy deal.
With these noon games, you don't really get to see anything after that. Maybe the late games, when you finally get home, these 3:30 like Ohio State had recently. At least I can get to the press box at noon and watch a noon game and maybe a couple, depending. But after that, it's just you're working. And, I try to record some games, but usually it's Ohio State's next opponent. Or I write about Michigan every week. So I have to watch a lot of Michigan as well. And you don't get to watch as much as you would like. It's a funny thing when you cover college football, you don't get to watch as much as you would like, because I think we all love the sport and could watch it 12 months a year. And so, yeah, this is going to be a fun weekend. And, I look at the TV schedule and I'm already imagining this is what this TV is going to be on. This is what my TV number 2 is going to be on. This is where my beer will be. This is where my pizza will be. And it's going to be a really good weekend.
Steve, I'm going to let you go off in just 2 seconds. Just want to comment on James Scott here. James, I would like you to come to work for me in regards to the promotion of the channel. This guy's just unbelievable. It's every live stream. He's telling people and he's giving them the formula of the likes, the comments, the shares, the whole deal. But now he's got the analytics down that he knows that 8 more likes and I'm going to be on the recommended list on YouTube. I don't know how he knows that, but James, I appreciate it. The other James Warner, also commending people to hit the like button. And this guy here, Steve Hellwagon, again, like button.
Hit it. Hit the like button.
We got to give you some kind of title. Are you like the dean of Big Ten? You're Big Ten senior writer there at 247 Sports. You're practically like the dean of Ohio State / Big Ten journalists.
Well, I'm up there. I don't know. I guess when you stick around long enough, they give you nice little titles like that. But yeah, you need to hire James to be your social media director. Sounds like he's got a handle on what you need to be doing, as the kids say, with social. So there you go.
Somebody needs to get the handle on it, because I sure don't. I'm just trying to do everything all at once. It's always a good discussion with Tony Gerderman from the Ozone and Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts. Please join them at their respective sites covering Ohio State football. And as you can tell from just listening to them, if this is the only slice you get from their content each and every week, that they know what they're talking about. That's why I have them on here to talk Ohio State football each and every week. I think we're going to keep our perfect record going on predictions this weekend. Buckeyes don't lose this week.
Yeah.
This is not going to be the week.
I had
Lay the points.
I had him 38-13. Our friend, which was pretty close, our friend Lori Schmidt from 610 Radio WTVN in Columbus. I think she was on the record saying 34-10. So congratulations to her. I put a pick competition together. I had one person online and another person on Twitter who both also had 34-10. So it was just kind of that 34-10. I see Dudley's comment there. I know that Tony Alford was in Georgia trying to convince a Georgia Tech commit from Dalton, Georgia. The name escapes me right now, but yeah, they're scrounging. They're out there beating the bushes. Running back's the one area where they have not recruited in this 2020 class, and otherwise it's a banner class, but have had a lot of guys kind of slip through their fingers. And there's a kid from Kaufman right there at Dublin, Michael Drennan, who's a possibility as well, but I'm not sure where things stand with him. But they've offered a bunch of running backs and haven't had a taker yet. And obviously Teague's got at least one more year left. And then they've got, Tony? Marcus Crowley and
Steel Chambers,
who are on scholarship as first-year players this year. So they got a few guys there, but they definitely expect Dobbins to go to the National Football League after this year. And the depth may not be exactly what they're looking for right now, but certainly I think they'll find one or more guys to help them round that position out.
It was interesting because Ryan Day said maybe a month or so ago that they didn't have any room for a running back because their running back room is full, and if they lost somebody to the NFL, then that would change. But they weren't talking. Yeah, they weren't talking like that when they were trying to get two guys committed earlier in the summer, and that didn't pan out. And they would still take the right guys, even if it's two, and they only have room for one. But right now they just need somebody. And you wonder if maybe Jalen Knighton would come back into the picture, who committed to Florida State over Ohio State. And you look at the two situations, and you wonder, like, why
are you going there, bro?
Why are you going there, bro? I think
why are you going there, bro?
Those are Ryan Day's exact words.
Sports Bowl, Orlando Champ Sports Bowl, 7-5. Why going there, bro?
Exactly.
We talk Ohio State football each and every week, 9:00 Eastern time, with the best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers. And these two are the stalwarts here. Tony Gerderman from the Ozone, and we got Steve Hellwagon on the line from Bucknuts as well. When I look at the number of people online, which we've hit a high, and this always happens when we're about ready to get off the air at 172. So that means what you need to do is you just wait a few minutes. The video will be available so you can back it up to the beginning and watch the entire thing. And I just think about the vast potential. You guys probably think about this in your various fields in regards to the number of fans that take in your work, and just the sheer mass of a fan base of Ohio State based on the size of the university, the alumni, and just people just love Ohio State football or hate Ohio State football. The interest is extremely high. And we've talked TV ratings. I don't know what they look like so far this season, but the Big Ten and the SEC own the TV ratings. Every game in the top 10 last year from those two conferences, and two or three particular teams from each conference hold that up, and Ohio State like none other from the Big Ten. So have you guys seen any other metrics out there to measure fan bases and the size of numbers of people who are interested in particular programs? And Ohio State, I got to think, is number 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah, the ESPN put out some metrics on the ABC.
What? ESPN, I've heard of them. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, those people. put up some metrics on the Michigan State Ohio State game, which was on ABC, and I think there were like 6.5 or 6.7 million people watching that game, and it wasn't even really that close of a game. So when you think about 27-10 at halftime, so that one did very well. I think it may be their highest rated game on ABC this season, and an improvement over last year. Ohio State week in and week out is typically in one of the top games in its time slot, whether it's at noon on Fox or 3:30 or a night game, whatever it may be. They are typically right up there. So I guess we'll have to see how it folds. And certainly the Wisconsin, the Penn State, and the Michigan games are all going to do big numbers down the stretch.
Yeah. And Mark, real quick, one of the questions was asking if Ohio State would go after Miami's 5-star running back. And I would doubt it, because anybody who commits to Miami doesn't do it for football purposes. So, they do it for everything other than football. So I don't think the two don't really mix, Ohio State and Miami commits and Miami recruits. So no, I would expect that they would not be involved there.
There you have it. I'm staying away from that comment. I got to cover all these teams. You
No.
guys forget that sometimes.
I'm just doing that for you, Mark.
Hey, for Daniel's comment there, Iowa beats Penn State 2-0. I put something on Twitter. It was 2004. Penn State defeated Iowa, and the final score was 6-4. Yes, 4 in a college football game. Penn State had a safety early in the game, and then took a deliberate safety at the end of the game so that they could punt the ball out of there or kick off the ball out of their own end zone without getting a punt block for a touchdown, and held on for the 6-4 victory. So, maybe that's what we're looking at again, although I think Penn State has a little bit more dynamic offense than that.
You would think so. But all right. Yeah, we're halfway home here in 2019. And the Buckeyes, of course, at 6-0. All right, guys, we appreciate you, with the heavy lifting tonight on our show number 20. Show number 20. Are you taking a set shot, Steve, or you're lifting?
Trying to lift this thing up over my head. Okay, got it.
Yes. You guys do the heavy lifting. I just take it in. And this is how it works.
And then you have somebody do your social media.
Yes. That's right.
You gotta get James in there to do your social media.
Yes. James does a fabulous job. Absolutely. We appreciate you guys stopping by. As always, you guys are always welcome. These guys give up their time each and every week for us. So please check out their work. The Ozone with Tony Gerdeman, 247 Sports, Bucknuts with Steve Hellwagon. All right, guys. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.
Have a good one.
Take care.